Hello everyone. So we're starting today with our figure drawing stream. Today we'll be drawing a male human figure. We'll be drawing mostly from imagination, but we will be using a reference for the pose. A gentle reference. We won't be copying this pose, we won't be relying too much on the Michelangelo, but we will take some ideas. So when we draw figure, when studying how to draw figure, it's good to start with the contrapposto. This is the Italian term for counterpoise. What we have here is that full weight of the figure is supported by one leg. This one is called the engaged leg, and the other leg is relaxed. It's the free leg. This means that the hips and legs axis is tilted like this, which makes the pose feel relaxed because it's exactly this tilt that frees the leg up and allows us to do things with that leg, like moving it aside a little bit. But it also means that this usually results in an opposite tilt of the shoulder. So for example, if our right hip is up, our right shoulder is down, and this results in this structure. Which the structure does very well is increase tension here as opposed to the relaxed part of the figure, to the relaxed plane. This is a very simple way to create dynamism in aesthetic pose, in aesthetic form, which is why it's commonly used by artists everywhere to study how to draw figure. And before we begin our own drawing, we will review the landmarks. Already we did multiple streams on torso, on the back, on the legs, on the arms, on pretty much everything except for the hands and full figure. And now we need to review the landmarks. So first thing first, our main landmark is this line. Let us imagine our full figure as one big vertical line, and then we bisect this line. As you can see, we managed to do it almost exactly in half, almost. And this line, its position, is on the iliac crest, on the upper side of the ridge of the iliac bone, right? So, which means that we divided our figure in two, using the top of the pelvis as our guiding structure. Now that we know the position of the top of the pelvis, we can briefly show the pelvis here. Let's make everything more visible. So this simple form is the pelvis, and then we have our rib cage. And since we are using Michelangelo, of course, it's very well defined, it's very easy to see, because the form is just so slightly exaggerated. So we have our rib cage. It's good to use these points to project sides in perspective. Now we have the end of the sternum and the position where our neck is attached. So let's create the neck projection plane. Now what we need is clavicles. And when we draw the ribcage, it's good to remember that the ribcage is formed like an egg, and the reason the form doesn't follow this egg shape is just latissimus dorsi, that we can see behind our ribcage. Now it's good to start marking the shoulder position with a sphere like this. And then at the beginning of the drawing a contrapposto figure, we usually do it like this. We just draw these sticks to imply the position of the arm and the legs. Now we can see that the pelvis is tilted, the hips are on different height, the right is upper, and this results in this axis of the knees being tilted as well. We already discussed this in our leg video and streams, but we'll repeat this anyway. This results in our free leg being able to do different things, like being put aside or put backwards, for example. And this allows the sculptor to show different viewpoint for different feet and exaggerate the relaxation of the pose. So those are the general landmarks that we'll be using, right? To reiterate, the iliac crest of the pelvis ends roughly at the half of the figure height, right? We'll move the axis here. So what we'll be doing is draw this axis and divide it by in half, bisect it. Then we'll need the rib cage, and in the rib cage we'll need sternum, the 7th rib, the point where it connects to the 8th, 9th, etc. And the 9th rib, the end of the rib cage. Well, obviously it ends at 10, but at 10th rib, but we don't see much of the rib number 10. So we'll be having this structure. And again, for the shoulders, we'll be using simple spheres in the beginning, and only then we'll be building the form on top of it. Now, in terms of the plasticity, let's look at this work by Katara Fukuto. We will be having some muscles here, which are not as clearly shown by Michelangelo because skin and fat, obviously. But we can see the main points of the muscle as well as some things about the rhythm of the figure. First of all, I'll remind you of this rhythm, right? This line is the outline of this leg, and here we will be having a more exaggerated S curve. Yes, I'll be talking about S curves in every video. Those are pretty important. Now we have the muscles and the tendons of the hips. We all know them by now, probably. So we have vastus medialis and vastus lateralis. Then we have the tendons of the quadricep connecting to the patella and creating a form of its own. And then we have the femoris muscle, or the straight muscle of the hip, and by divided from other muscles of the hip by sartorius, we have abductors of the hip, longus, and the bigger one, and we have the gracilis muscle. Then we have the adductor fasciae lata and the gluteus medius in behind. These are for the hip, which we'll need. These ones will simplify a little bit. Mostly those engage fingers, but we'll also see the bones, fibula and tibia, fibula here, tibia here. We should remember about this thing and this axis, right? When we're drawing the gastrocnemius, we're imagining this little stick and then this thing on the stick like this, and then we have fibula and tibia. As for the hands, we have a similar style of shape, so we have thick deltoid, thin tricep and biceps area, and then we have once again a thick forearm. This is just to repeat what we know, and now we will start. So first thing first, we need our big straight line. To define the starting and ending position of the figure. Move it like this. Maybe make it a little bigger. Now, about some things that we maybe won't be taking from the David is that his head is pretty big. This is done intentionally. His proportions are still heroic, but they are not too heroic because the David is supposed to be the smaller one, right? So we can make the head a little smaller if we want. Of course, he also has a lot of hair, and the other thing is that the sculpture is very huge. It's supposed to be viewed from below, so the head is made larger to compensate for the perspective of the viewer as well. But that's neither here nor there. So we have our position of the pelvis at roughly the halfway point of the figure. And then we have the general line of our shape. Again, we won't be copying this directly, so our pose will be different, but it's good to have some sort of reference. Now we can imagine a scale of sorts when dealing with the proportions of the figure, right? We know that the head will be either 1/8 or 1/7 or 1/6 of the figure as long as we are drawing an adult person. Of course, with children it can go way bigger than that. Then we'll be having neck, and of course we'll be having our rib cage. And then we're just defining our general positions of the rib cage and the pelvis. It's good to use not only the line inside, but the line outside the central line of symmetry. What we are doing right now is create the shape of pelvis and rib cage, the shape that we discussed so many times when drawing torso, this shape. You can already see that pretty much every torso in those videos about torso and the back had this tension here and this relaxed line here. That's because every torso up till now was done in contrapposto to prepare you for this. At this point we can also create an axis for pelvis and axis for hips, and axis for ribcage and shoulders in order to show the movement. Here we have our pelvis, moved a little bit, and here we have our shoulders. Now, The length of the arm is defined by the ribcage, which means that when the ribcage ends, the length of the humerus bone ends. Now we'll be having a different position of the arm, something like this probably. This is the wrist. And let's continue with defining the forms. What we're drawing currently is something like a simplified skeleton. As you can see, I'm not drawing the silhouette, I'm not drawing the shapes, I'm not drawing the muscles right now. It's important to constantly remind everyone, I believe, that most of the drawing is calculation, guidelines, measurements, proportions, stuff. And only when we are really sure in our calculations, measurements and stuff, we go for the kill and start like drawing stuff. Well, the misattributed quote, misattributed so much so I don't really know whom it belongs to, is that drawing is thinking with a pencil in hand. So we're just thinking, deliberating. We can create the general shape of the external oblique and the fat that lies on it. We're changing the direction of the central axis of the figure, so that we'll be having more of a side view to the chest and more of the frontal view to the pelvis, which is a different decision than here when we have the ribcage facing us and the pelvis also facing us. So we're changing already, because again we're not following the reference too much. It's good to do what you want with the reference, take the things that you want to take and ignore the things that you don't want. But of course, it's good to understand what you're doing. Now that we have our iliac crest position, let's create a section like this, and then the position of the iliac bones sticking out here will allow us to create this section. And this section is also an abstraction. It doesn't look exactly like this on the figure, right? But it's similar enough on the figure, and it's a thing that like every sculptor loves to exaggerate and show. For example, look at this. The refers by the polycletus. So we have this shape here. Again, we also have a strong contrapposta, right? And we have the free leg being put in the back. And yes, this shape again, which is mostly the pyramidalis muscle here, and the external oblique and the fat tissue here being pushed against the iliac crest. So there we have it. And now we can create a section like this very quickly. We need what we need to do is find the end of the sternum and the end of the rib cage, and we need it in order to find this arc, the arc of the rib cage, which actually goes like this, right? This is something we did a lot in the torso drawing. By finding the sternum, we also found our clavicles. And by finding our clavicles, we can find the trapezius muscle, like this. They kind of wrap around the neck. And now let's think about the ribs. So if we have 7s here and 6 just almost at the same height, then we'll have 5ths around here, which means that here is where we attach our breasticles, sorry, our chest muscles, our pectoralis majoris. And what we can do first is to connect a curve like this to the foundation of the neck. What it does is show the side plane of the chest. Why do we need it? Because the pectoralis majoris wraps around here and it turns away exactly at this point. Again, probably something I discussed earlier, but we're revising a lot of what we did earlier today. This is mostly the final boss and the stream in which we assemble everything we learned up till now into one full figure. And of course, everything that we're discussing today will be added to the folder, as well as assignments picture, so you'll be able to draw your contrapposto studies. Of course, the reference will be a bunch of sculptures again. I'll also add some paintings of the figure, but we won't be using too much photo references because not exactly easy to find what we need here, and what we need here is a good contrapposto. The publicly available photo model photos usually don't go for the contrapposto. Probably because it's too much 16th century stuff. And now we can show the direction of the ribs. So this here is 7th. And we can instantly create a guideline and project it. Same here, 8th, 9th, and 6 will be here hidden. Now we can create the abdominal muscle. Again, first we start with 2 pieces of fabric going like this. Then we add a circle here. And these oval shapes here. It's also good to show that the ribcage has volume. It has this face here that goes inside the form. So it goes kinda like this. Goes down and then up like this. Now this part can be made weaker because the bone is hidden beneath the abdominal muscles. Sometimes it's shown clearly, sometimes not. And we can create a more interesting shape of the pectoralis majoris and create the strength of the pectoralis majoris. Also, let's define the volume of the shoulder. First, we create a box here. This box divides our shoulder into three planes: frontal, the one on the side, and the upper plane. And now we can sort of move this guideline here in a curve to show that the other shoulder is rotated away from us. So now we have foundations of the figure in the upper parts of it. Let's go down. We need a leg. As always, defining the silhouette. Now, what is good to do when starting is project this line. It's a guideline that mimics the guideline of the pelvis. And now, at the rough position of the knees, we add these spheres. 1, 2. This will be very useful. Why? First, we have sartorius wrap around such a sphere. So, goes like this and goes up to the iliac crest, dividing the leg into two shapes: the adductor muscles and the vastus medialis. And then, from this point, we just continue the line, only this time this is tibia. So we continue along the tibia. And then add this axis to create the gastrocnemius muscle. Then we're attaching the soleus muscle. Let's move the tibia a little bit, like this, increase the curvature. Soleus muscle here and on the back. Tibia, fibula, and then we can attach the feet if we want. We'll start with the simplified one. A bit too much exaggeration. Let's decrease this a little bit and unify the shape of the soleus with the gastrocnemius. For a while this will do. What we have here is this structure, this structure. Now the sphere that we have, we divide it in half with a section. This section allows us to define the patella, so we add another sphere on top of our sphere, and then we create this line dividing into main line, and this one is 2/3 of the main line, and we create a shape like this. Then we connect the outline, and what we got is not only did we get patella, but we got its planes, because it has side planes and upper plane and the frontal plane. So this is the simplification of the patella. Let's now attach the tendon of the quadriceps. Here it is, attached. Then we have the vastus medialis on the side. And we're using the line of the sphere to kind of divide it into lower half and the main half. And here we have vastus lateralis. Now, of course, we're also having here a little bit of fat tissue, and then we have the tibia tuberosity, which results in this beak-shaped thing. And let's create a bit of bounce light on the side. So yeah, we defined the knee maybe a bit earlier, but we defined it. And now let's go with the other leg. So sartorius muscle wraps around the knee, the adductors attach here, and here we'll be having a shape like this. And then it's good to define the tibia first, and then attach the gastrocnemius muscle. Like this. Here is the gastrocnemius muscle. Now let's complete the silhouette of the leg by attaching soleus and making the shapes better. By the way, this side of the arm can be simplified as one big C curve. Yes, curves again. You got to love the curves. All this curve talk is my attempt to sneak basics of composition into drawing stuff, because they're everywhere and you need to be wary of them, because everything is a composition. Now let's make this deltoid a big deltoid that we can be proud of. Then attach the actually we need the latissimus dorsi here. There we have our latissimus dorsi. And then we have our arm and forearm. Now the height of the lower arm, the one that's facing the engaged leg, will reach the middle of the thigh. And there we have it. We have a general construction of the figure. And now let's define the forms. So from this point on, I will be temporarily shutting up and making the music louder. Let's draw. Yeah, so there we have it. This is the foundation of the drawing. Obviously, one can render and render and render, but in this one we solved most of the main points. As you can probably guess, this one was never David to begin with, more like something like an anime Adam holding probably an apple. So yeah, as you can see, we assembled all the key points: the chest, the pelvis, the knees, the feet, the hands. We simplified the hands and feet as we usually do when we do a short 2-hour long figure drawing. Obviously we can define them at our leisure if we're working on 12-hour drawing or something like that, but for now this will do. And now the assignments. As we did previously with videos like this, we have a Google folder, and I included new materials in this folder. To those new to the channel, check the link in the video description. This is where you'll find all the assignments. So, new materials. They include a folder with examples, basically what we did today, and another drawing, and a folder with references. Let's look at those references. Yes, those are all statues done in ancient Greece, ancient Rome, Renaissance, and others like this. Classical sculptures in contrapposto or similar poses. This is the ultimate test of what you learned up till now. So they don't include cheat sheets. By now you should have studied every part separately. You should have done a bunch of drawings of torso, legs, hands, feet, etc. And you should be ready. Expect to spend something like 5 to 9 hours on a figure and do a drawing or a couple of these statues. It will help you a lot. And this is it for today's video. If you like this content, please press the like button and consider subscribing for more educational content about learning how to draw, about learning how to do art. More videos like this coming in the future. We still have to do female figure and other fun stuff. So thank you for watching, and bye!